Picture the moment. Not a history book moment, not a museum diorama moment, a real one. You are standing in a landscape that no longer exists. The air is warmer than you expect. The grass is tall and yellow, moving in a wind that carries the smell of something large and alive somewhere nearby. You are not alone. Around you, several other figures move quietly through the brush, smaller than you expected, darker, more muscular, more alert. Their eyes scan constantly, their feet move without sound. And these are your ancestors, the first humans, and they look almost nothing like what you have been shown. For most of recorded history, we imagine the first humans as brutes, hunched, grunting, half-animal blunt instruments of instinct and appetite. That image is wrong in almost every detail, and the real picture built painstakingly over the last century from bones and stones and sediment is far stranger, far more interesting, and in many ways far more recognizable than the cartoon version. So what were the first humans actually like? The answer depends on what you mean by human. That word carries more weight than it can hold. Paleoanthropologists, scientists who study the fossil record of human ancestors, use the term hominin to describe the broader family that includes modern humans and our extinct relatives. The earliest members of this family appeared in Africa somewhere between 6 and 7 million years ago, but when most people ask about the first humans, they are really asking about Homo sapiens, our species. And Homo sapiens is surprisingly young. The oldest confirmed fossils of our species were found at a site called Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, dated in a 2017 study led by Jean-Jacques Hublin of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology to approximately 300,000 years ago. That is when the bones in the ground first looked like us. Except they do not look exactly like us, and that is where it gets interesting. The Jebel Irhoud skulls have faces that are essentially modern flat, with the same small brow ridges and the same basic structure you would recognize in a mirror. But the back of the skull is different, longer, more elongated. The brain case had not yet achieved the round globular shape that modern humans carry today. The full anatomical package, the complete modern human skull, did not solidify until somewhere between 100,000 and 130,000 years ago. What this means is that Homo sapiens did not arrive fully formed. It emerged. It assembled itself piece by piece over tens of thousands of years, the face arriving before the brain case, the body arriving before the behavior. So what did these early humans look like physically, shorter than the modern average? Studies of skeletal remains from early Homo sapiens populations suggest average heights in the range of 160 to 165 centimeters, roughly 5 feet 4 inches. They were lean and muscular, built for endurance movement across open landscapes rather than explosive power. Their bones show the kind of stress markers that come from a life of constant walking, carrying, and climbing. Anthropologist Herman Ponzer at Duke University has spent years studying the energetics of human movement and finds that the human body is uniquely built for long-distance travel, more efficient at sustained walking than almost any other primate. That efficiency was not an accident. It was hammered into your skeleton over millions of years of ancestors who survived because they could cover ground. Their skin was almost certainly dark. This is not conjecture. It follows directly from evolutionary biology. Dark skin is the ancestral human condition in equatorial Africa, where ultraviolet radiation is intense and melanin provides critical protection against DNA damage and folate degradation. A 2017 study by researchers including Nina Jablonski at Penn State confirmed that the genetic variants for lighter skin evolved much later and much farther from the equator as human populations migrated into lower UV environments and needed to synthesize more vitamin D from weaker sunlight. The pale skin of European and East Asian populations is a recent adaptation, perhaps only 10,000 to 20,000 years old. The first humans looked like the people who still live closest to the environment that shaped them. Their brains were large, roughly the same volume as yours, around 1,300 to 1,400 cubic centimeters. But brain size alone does not tell you much. What matters is organization, and here the picture gets genuinely surprising. Evidence from endocast impressions left by the brain on the inner surface of the skull suggests that early Homo sapiens had brains that were already wired for language, social complexity, and abstract thought. The regions associated with speech and higher cognition were already present. Whether those regions were being used in the same way modern brains use them is harder to know, but the hardware was there. And the behavior. The behavior is where your assumptions will be most severely tested. The oldest confirmed evidence of symbolic behavior in Homo sapiens comes from sites like Blombos Cave on the southern coast of South Africa, where archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood and his team have excavated ochre pieces engraved with geometric crosshatch patterns dated to around 75,000 to 100,000 years ago. These are not functional objects, they are not tools for cutting or scraping. They are marks made for the sake of making marks, abstract patterns that had meaning to the person who made them. And from the same site, perforated shells that were almost certainly strung as beads. Jewelry, personal adornment, identity. Think about what that requires. To make a bead, you need to understand that other people will see you wearing it and form an impression. You need a theory of mind and awareness that other people have inner lives that can be influenced. You need a concept of self that extends beyond the immediate moment. You need, in other words, something that looks very much like a human interior. The first humans were not grunting brutes. They were self-aware. They decorated their bodies. They marked surfaces with symbols that meant something to them. They almost certainly had language, not in the clumsy, primitive sense of a few warning calls, but a fully recursive, open-ended system capable of describing things that are not present, events that have not yet happened, and ideas that have no physical form at all. Linguist Noam Chomsky has argued for decades that the capacity for recursive language, the ability to embed one thought inside another indefinitely, is the defining cognitive leap that separates humans from every other species. The brain that produced beads at Blombos Cave had that capacity. They lived in groups, not the solitary wandering loner of popular imagination. The evidence from modern hunter-gatherer societies and from archaeological site density points consistently to bands of roughly 20 to 50 individuals who moved together, shared food, raised children cooperatively, and maintained much larger networks of relationship across neighboring groups. Evolutionary anthropologist Sarah Hrdy at UC Davis has spent decades arguing that cooperative child rearing, what she calls cooperative breeding, was one of the key drivers of human cognitive evolution. Infants in early human bands were held and cared for by multiple adults, not just their biological mothers. That web of shared attention shaped the infant brain to be exquisitely sensitive to the intentions and emotions of others. Your capacity for empathy was forged in those bands. They faced real terror. The landscape of early Homo sapiens was not a gentle place. Lions, leopards, hyenas, and crocodiles were constant threats. Early humans were not yet the dominant predator. They were often prey. Anthropologist Robert Sussman at Washington University spent years challenging the assumption that our ancestors were primarily hunters, arguing instead that the threat of predation was so severe that avoiding becoming prey was a more pressing daily concern than catching it. Your instinct to scan a dark room when you enter it, your unease in open spaces without cover, your alertness to sound at the edge of your hearing, these are the legacies of a species that spent hundreds of thousands of years being hunted. And yet they persisted. They crossed deserts and mountain ranges. They crossed open water. They developed the cognitive tools to read landscapes, predict animal behavior, store and transmit vast bodies of ecological knowledge across generations, and adapt to environments as different as tropical forests, Arctic tundra, and open savanna. They did all of this without writing, without institutions, without anything we would recognize as civilization. They did it with the same brain you are using right now to process these words. That is perhaps the most disorienting fact in all of human origins. The brain that reads this sentence is not a modern upgrade of the first human brain. It is, in all essential respects, the same brain, the same architecture, the same wiring, the same capacity for language, abstraction, emotion, and art. The first humans were not a primitive version of you. They were you, placed in a different landscape, carrying different knowledge, wearing different things, or nothing at all, but behind the eyes the same. You are not the product of progress. You are the continuation of something that was already in its first expression, fully, unmistakably, bewilderingly human. Picture the moment again. The tall yellow grass, the warm wind, the quiet figures moving through the brush with alert, scanning eyes. One of them glances in your direction. You recognize the look.